So my presentation is divided into two. First half is my background. Second half is my perspective on yoga. And I have a piece that I'm installing at the end of the month. Right, here we go. Downstairs in the education room. I was brought up by immigrant parents from a small farming village in India. They headed out west for their American dream. Dad was a chemist and then ended up buying a motel on a New Jersey freeway, which I also called home. Living in two worlds at times, being home in a Hindu Jain household and at Catholic school where I attended all my life, and Jain summer camps inserted in between. Went to India several times growing up, culture shock for a kid from New Jersey. On these trips, we exclusively spent the time in my parents' rural farming village. At the same time, back in New Jersey, there was a big movement against the the growth of the South Asian population. A group called the Dot Busters, referring to the Bindis, they harassed the South Asian community and referred to us as dot heads. Also two worlds at home. Example with music, parents were performing devotional music or listening to Bollywood tunes upstairs while I was downstairs trying to mimic a Led Zeppelin or a Nirvana tune on my drum set. I went to art school and was reintroduced to Bollywood through hip-hop samples. Moved to New York and I started experimenting with the found imagery off the LPs, creating work that was inspired by both worlds. Experimented with this direction and started to create work under the moniker Pardon My Hindi. I had an opportunity to spend 4 months in India through an artist I met in New York. This gave me an opportunity to see the country and experience the culture from a whole new perspective. I came back to New York and later SF and started creating silkscreen prints from all the inspiration I collected, housing them on a website and blog I created. Putting my work out helped me meet other artists that related to what I was doing. This really helped me out. Most of them musicians, creating album artwork for Talvin Singh, Vijay Iyer, Rudresh Mahantapa, as well as the hip-hop group Das Races. This illustration I did was used for their tour merch and visuals. This next project that I did for Levi's Asia, they commissioned me to design a line of Pardon My Hindi t-shirts. All these designs were heavily inspired by my trips back to India, so seeing them back in India where they started was a little bit crazy for me. They were sold in India, Pakistan, Singapore, China, Korea. The Arch Motel project was named after my parents' first entrepreneurial step and my first home. This project, which I did with my friend Mark, documents independent Gujarati motels in America. This small community came over to the US in the 40s and within one generation own around 50% of every motel and hotel in America. Capturing juxtapositions of Indian and American culture as well as identity. In this photo you see a Hindu shrine under the front desk, out of the view from the customer, but right above is the crucifix to assure the customer that everything was going to be all right. 10 photos are part of the exhibition at the Smithsonian. Okay, so that was all a setup to give you a better idea of my perspective on yoga and my piece that I'm installing at the end of the month here at the Asian Art Museum called #WhitePeopleDoingYoga. The hashtag symbolizing the commercialization and commodification of a culture. This piece is a reflection of my personal relationship as an Indian American with yoga and its migration to today's Western context. Not too long before moving to the Bay Area 7 years ago, I began to collect grassroots level meditation and yoga ephemera from the 60s to the 80s. During the era, particularly in the Bay Area, yoga started making a big impact on Western culture. I became interested in how yogic practice was being mined and commercialized, how the South Asian face of the discipline was being removed in the branding and the portrayal of the practice and the culture. Today, an online search for yoga mainly returns images of white people in various poses followed by images of dogs and cats doing the same. This product is not about the individual pieces in my collection, but the overall voice that is put out in front of us, which is overwhelming and suffocating to me. After you go through the exhibition, you will notice a sharp turn as yoga enters a new level of commercialization in the West. The The $27 billion yoga industry in the US has rebranded a complex and rich discipline to make it easier to sell yoga as a line of products. Brands like Lululemon and Nike have started appropriating and trademarking phrases, postures, and clothing, aligning and embedding themselves in our understanding of yoga. Simultaneously, the South Asian face and voices are relegated to an exotic character, cartoons, adaptations of South Asian names by Westerners, mystical creatures, and Hindu gods. One archival study of the health and wellness magazine, Yoga Journal, found that over the course of 2 years, there was never a South Asian person on the cover, and less than 1% of the content contributors were South Asian. I'll let you guys take that in. The act of selectivity, choosing what works in popular Western contexts, while ignoring aspects of yoga core philosophy, historic practice, is telling. It shows an ironic attachment of one's ego to a desire for ownership over an ancient practice of material denouncement that emerges from an altogether different South Asian tradition. In the end, I feel very compelled to draw parallels between the current state of yoga and the industrial colonization by the same dominant voice that now adds another conquest to its collection. Meet the new founders of yoga. For the last side, I'll leave you with the king himself.
Twist my legs, pull my arms a lot. How did I get so tied up in this yoga knot? You tell me just how I can take this yoga serious when all it ever gives to me is a pain in my posterior.